It has come to this. Well, before I get started on reviewing this film, I should mention that I sort of already did. Some of you might remember I posted a review of the film very shortly after seeing it. However, that was what I call a candid mini-review, not a full review. In that video, I was in front of a camera giving my opinion of the film very shortly after seeing it, basing everything off of memory and only having seen it once. In a real review like this one, I've seen the movie more than once, let it sink in, carefully plot out what I want to say, and I give a final rating. So those of you who remember my old review will now see how I feel about the movie over a year later, and having seen it a few times. Star Trek broke the drought of no new Trek for 7 years. After the low ratings and cancellation of Star Trek Enterprise and the commercial failure of Star Trek Nemesis, Paramount put the series to bed. And maybe it was for the best. After all, when a series has issues, sometimes it needs to take a few years off and be rebooted, like with Batman. In the interim, Paramount was not interested in doing anything with Star Trek. They had been approached with numerous ideas and pitches for movies or new series and ignored them all. They just weren't willing to talk about Trek, at least until J.J. Abrams became involved. Due partly to his involvement in the hit TV show Lost, Abrams was a huge name. But he revived an old idea. Go back to the beginning and do a prequel. Recast the original series, but make it modern-looking, sleek, and stylish. Star Trek is the sort of movie that, while it certainly is aimed at the fans, it's also aimed at attracting and bringing in people who are not fans. It's so easy to have never been a fan or seen a single bit of Star Trek and to fully understand and enjoy this film. And if you are a fan, there's a lot to be said for seeing how it all started. The film has an all-star cast, though most of the primary cast are TV actors like Chris Pine as Kirk, Zachary Quinto as Spock, and Zoe Saldana as Uhura. But also some big-name actors such as Carl Urban as Bones, Eric Bana as the main villain Nero, and Winona Ryder as Amanda Grayson, Spock's human mother. There's also other familiar faces, too. Harold from Harold and Kumar plays Sulu, who is a total badass in this movie, by the way, and Dr. Cameron from House is Kirk's mom. The film went through all sorts of crazy titles like Star Trek The Future Begins and Star Trek Zero, but in the end they decided to just call it Star Trek, which works fine for me. One thing that the movie does, that people have debated about, is due to the time travel aspect of the story, everything has changed, meaning that things can easily happen differently than they did in the original canon. The movie does this both to be able to take risks, and also not to be burdened by continuity. If you're starting a new series, you should be able to do so unburdened by 30 seasons of various shows and 10 films. Interesting, I think the only Star Trek that shares continuity with this movie is actually Enterprise, as it takes place before the timeline split. Having this all take place in an alternate universe also, I think, is good for the fans, as everything they know and love is still quite valid. When I originally was planning on going to see the movie, I wasn't sure what to expect. It looked great, with a fresh young cast, what looked like exciting action, a decent budget, and most of all, it looked like a lot of fun. You had the movie breathing life into an old beloved series, and also giving you so many of the things you wanted. It seemed almost too good to be true. One thing that threw me immediately was the special effects. Even from the trailer, you can tell they're great. Star Trek movies always had a limited budget, dating back to The Wrath of Khan. It was almost like with the first movie, Paramount gave the director a blank check, but after it didn't make as big of a profit as they wanted, they were always very stingy afterwards, as if it was impossible for Star Trek to be a huge blockbuster, so they had to cut back on special effects so they'd make more money. At least they got their head out of their asses for this one and remembered that you gotta spend money to make money. I just think back to Nemesis and the battle that the Enterprise had with Shinzon's ship, and how they were joined by 2 Romulan warbirds. They wanted it to be a whole Romulan fleet, but that was too expensive. Now just think about this film, and the space battles. Yeah, things have changed for the better. The movie's plot is interesting. In some ways it references a lot of the older films, specifically The Wrath of Khan. There's a lot of similarities. Like that movie, this one begins on Kirk's birthday, only in this one it's like literally the day he was born. His father is serving on board the USS Calvin when they experience an unusual phenomenon, a black hole and a huge ship comes out of. The ship, piloted by tattooed Romulans who kick Federation ass. The Calvin's captain goes over to the ship to negotiate and gives Kirk's dad a field promotion to captain. The Romulan captain, Nero, is looking for Ambassador Spock, who they've never heard of. Finding out that they're far in the past, Nero is pissed off and kills the captain and again opens fire on the ship. George Kirk saves many people, including his wife and son, who is being born at that moment, by staying on the ship to crash it into Nero's ship, which disables it. So Kirk grows up without a father and is his reckless, wild youth who steals cars when he's a teenager, and as a young adult spends most of his time getting drunk and hitting on women at a local bar. After losing a bar fight to some cadets trying to get him away from Uhura, Captain Pike shows up and basically taunts Kirk into joining Starfleet. There he meets Bones, and the two become friends pretty much right away. Meanwhile, you also get to see Spock's childhood. As a youngster, he's smart even by Vulcan standards, but is teased and bullied by other youths for being half-human. As a young adult, he's accepted into the Vulcan Science Academy, but tells them to fuck off when they view his human side as being a handicap, so he joins Starfleet. Kirk and Spock meet at the Academy when Kirk cheats at the Kobayashi Maru test, which Spock had been programming. During a hearing to address these charges, Starfleet gets a distress call from Vulcan. Kirk is grounded, but McCoy drags him along on the Enterprise by making him sick with the vaccine and taking him along as a patient. While in sickbay, Kirk realizes that they're walking into a trap, that they're about to engage the same ship that destroyed his father's ship. We're also introduced to some of the other characters, most notably Chekhov and Sulu. Due to Sulu having some issues with getting the ship going, the Enterprise arrives late and the fleet is already destroyed. Nero disables the ship but stops short of destroying it, realizing it's the Enterprise. Nero hails them and confronts Spock and demands Captain Pike come on over to negotiate. Pike goes over, but in the shuttle he has Kirk, Sulu, and Engineer Olsen, the new Star Trek's first certified red shirt, space jump down to the planet. Nero is attacking Vulcan with a drill, and the drill is also interfering with the Enterprise's transport beams and communication systems. Pike gets captured, Olsen gets fried, and Kirk nearly dies himself, but Sulu just beats the shit out of all the Romulans on the drill platform, and they stop the drill, however, it's too late. Nero injects a drop of red matter into the core of the planet, which destroys Vulcan. Spock manages to get the Vulcan scientists out, including his father Sarek, but Amanda dies after a cliff falls out from under her, and Chekhov loses the transporter signal on her. As Pike is gone, Spock is now the captain, and Kirk is first officer. They argue heatedly over what to do next, and it gets to the point where Spock gets so fed up with him that he does the Vulcan nerve pinch and dumps his ass in an escape pod. Kirk winds up on an ice planet, Delta Vega, where he's chased by creatures. A mysterious figure chases them off with a torch, and holy fuck, it's Leonard Nimoy. We'll call him Spock Prime. Spock Prime and Nero are from the future, where Romulus was destroyed by a black hole. Spock tried to save the planet, but was too late, though he did stop the supernova before it could destroy any other planets. Nero blames Spock for everything that destroyed Vulcan as revenge. He also blames the Federation, so now he's heading to Earth to do the same thing. Spock Prime and Kirk go to a Federation outpost where they meet Scotty. Spock gives Scotty his equation for transport beaming, something he had theorized but not perfected until the future. They use this to get onto the Enterprise, though Spock Prime stays behind. He tells Kirk that he has to be the captain, and his younger self must give up his command because he is emotionally compromised by the loss of Vulcan and his mother. Kirk makes Captain Spock realize this, and he does give up his command, though he beats the shit out of Kirk first. Hell, if Sarek hadn't come on, he probably would have killed him. Man, no one fucks with Spock in this movie. Kirk changes course to attack Nero at Earth rather than gather the rest of the fleet. Spock becomes a science officer, which is where he belongs. We also learn that Spock and Uhura are in a relationship, which is pretty damn interesting, especially that Kirk had been hitting on her throughout the whole damn movie. Anyway, Nero has his drill hitting San Francisco, but the Enterprise shows up and destroys it. Kirk and Spock beam over to Nero's ship, Kirk rescues Captain Pike, and Spock steals the Jellyfish, Spock Prime's ship, that had been captured by Nero and carries the red matter. Nero loses sight of all his goals and just wants Spock dead, so he fires all of his torpedoes at the Jellyfish, despite knowing that igniting the red matter would destroy him as well. He's a little bit like Khan, only instead of being obsessed with killing Kirk, he's obsessed with killing Spock. The Enterprise shows up again, and Sulu blasts the shit out of Nero, and Scotty warps Kirk, Pike, and Spock out of danger. They destroy what's left of Nero's ship, and he turns down their offer of help and only barely escape the black hole by ejecting and detonating the warp core. In the end, Kirk is given a commendation for valor, and he relieves Pike, now an admiral, as captain of the Enterprise. Spock considers leaving Starfleet to rebuild the Vulcan race and culture, but Spock Prime shows up and asks him not to, as he can now be in two places at once, and that Kirk and Spock really need each other. The film ends with the famous opening monologue, this time spoken by Leonard Nimoy, just like the end of Wrath of Khan. Personally, my opinion of the film hasn't changed much. When it came out, I thought it was great, and if my opinion has changed at all, it's that I probably like it more after seeing it a few more times. It's fast-paced, exciting, and stylish, but is still very much Star Trek. The cast is great. Probably the only odd choice is Kal Penn as Sulu, but he still does a great job. Everyone else is so close. I was especially pleased with Carl Urban as Bones, who seems to be channeling DeForest Kelley, but never degrading his performance to doing an imitation. The film is full of great touches and references to older films in the series, but at the same time, it's 100% accessible to everyone. Star Trek is my favorite film of the series. Though it really isn't part of the series, it starts a brand new one, and it looks like we're in for a great new franchise. A lot of people have talked about what will Captain Kirk face for the next film. Will it be Khan, the Guardian of Forever, or something unusual like the Borg, or even Q? Personally, I'd love to see Q, even if John Delancey doesn't play him, which is probably what would happen. Q has never been in a Trek movie, and he's never met Captain Kirk, so I think that would be a great opportunity. But anyway, my final assessment of Star Trek is that it's pretty much perfect. It's the right blend of action, adventure, and sci-fi, and respects the old canon without being a slave to it. Paramount's gamble paid off, and it became the highest-grossing Star Trek film, finally eclipsing The Voyage Home. I give Star Trek a 10 out of a possible 10.